Welcome to Fix It Home Improvement, covering projects that every homeowner should know and great products for home and garden.
Hi, I'm JC, and this is where we share weekly home improvement tips. I'm here with my co-host, Cindy.
Hello, JC.
Hi, Cindy. Today we're going to be talking about timers and dimmers, and we'd like to thank Bruce McCallum for liking and sharing the podcast. Intermatic came out with their first timers in 1945 to control electric signs and lights for retail stores. In 1952, they came out with some of the first timers for homes, and they called it the Time All style, and they still produce that style. So it plugs into a wall outlet and has plastic tabs that you set into a rotating clock dial, and that turns on and off the timer.
I'm familiar with it.
Some of the first dimmers for homes came out in the early 1960s from Lutron, and some of the early magazine ads they had the slogan, "Dial in Romance" with a light dimmer. And some of those early ads are in the Smithsonian Museum. There are a variety of timers you can get for lights or appliances. For your light fixtures, you can replace the wall switch with an in-wall timer that can either be mechanical or digital. You can also get Wi-Fi switches, so you can control it with your smartphone. Some are going to have rechargeable batteries that can't be removed. Some are going to have replaceable batteries. And some, rather than just connecting it with your hot wire, some are going to need a neutral wire to operate. You can also get countdown timers. So rather than going on and off at a specific time of the day, these you can have them turn off after a certain amount of time. So great for the bathroom if you have people that aren't leaving the fan on long enough after a shower or a bath. So Newtone, the bathroom exhaust manufacturer, they recommend that you leave your bathroom exhaust fan on for 20 minutes after a shower to control moisture and humidity.
Right.
You can also get timers that have humidity sensors, and they're specifically made for bathrooms. This is going to automatically turn on and off at specific humidity levels, and that way it's going to take the guesswork out of how long to keep it on.
So do you set that?
No, these are great. They automatically turn themselves on and off. So when it reaches, over 50% humidity, it turns on. Once it's under that, it turns off. And that's going to help control mold and mildew. And especially, if you have a bathroom in the bedroom. In-wall timers are great for porch lights and switched outlets that you're using for security lighting.
So is it a switch?
Well, a lot of them you can use like a traditional switch, so you can just override it and turn it on and off, but then you're going to set the time when you want the lights to go on and off normally. So let's say you generally come in every day at 7 o'clock and it's dark. You want that light to turn on maybe 15 minutes before you get home so you don't have to walk into a dark home. Or you'll have the porch light come on before you get home, so it's easy to put your key in the front lock. It's also good for security. The front of your house is lit. You can also get self-learning timers. So when it's set on the learning mode, it's going to analyze the pattern throughout the day of when you're turning on and off that switch, and then it's going to take it over. So you don't have to touch the switch anymore. It knows your routine.
Because it's hard to touch a switch?
It's the 21st century, Cindy. And then if you're overriding it, let's say your schedule changes and you're overriding the regular routine, it'll learn that and take that over too.
Or you just want to mess with it?
If you see astronomic or astro, the timer keeps track of sunrise and sunset and also daylight savings time. So you can set the year, the month, the day, the time, the daylight savings time. You set your zone, so either the north part, the central, or the south part of the country, and it's automatically going to turn on and off at sunset and sunrise, or you can set other times too, but it always knows when it's dark.
Spooky.
When you're comparing in-wall timers, you want to check to see if it's compatible with the types of bulbs you plan on using. So will it be incandescent, LEDs, CFLs, or fluorescents? And
if it's halogen?
So halogen are basically incandescent bulbs, so it'd be the same thing. If you have fluorescent fixtures, will it work with magnetic or electronic ballast or low voltage ballast? You also want to check the min-max amount of watts it's rated for. You're going to add up the amount of watts of all of the bulbs you're going to be using on that circuit with the switch and make sure it matches. When you're comparing timers, I would also make sure it works like a conventional switch. You can turn it on and off and override the program. Yeah, some are just programmable, so you're going to tell it when to turn on and off. And then how many times can you change the program per day? Is there a random mode for vacation? That way it looks like somebody's home. Does it need a neutral wire or not? And if it has a battery backup for power outages, is it built in and rechargeable, or is it replaceable? For most lighting, a 15 amp switch is going to do the job, but if you're running a pool pump or other motors, you might need a 20 amp switch. And then how big
You
is
would have that on a timer?
Yes, so like a lot of pools, you're going to run it occasionally to keep it clean.
Right,
So you're going to be running the pump or other motors. And then how big is your electrical box? How many wires are in it? Does the timer have wire leads that you're buying, or is it a timer that just has screw terminals? The timers with the wire leads, you have that extra wire, plus you need wire nuts to connect it. It's going to take up more room in the box.
So you should probably remove your old switch first.
Yeah, which is smart, because now you can look in the box, see what you're dealing with. Do you have a neutral wire available? Because many of these timers, you're going to need a neutral wire.
Right.
If the box doesn't have a neutral wire available, then you're going to have to get a timer without one. Also, is it a single pole or a three-way circuit? And you need to buy the right timer for that. One of the in-wall timers I looked at from Honeywell was a 7-day programmable for lights and motors up to 2400 watts. It was single pole only, and it needed a neutral wire. It had manual override on and off without affecting the program, and this worked with incandescent fluorescent CFL electronic ballast and up to a 1-horse motor. Another timer from Intermatic could be used as a single pole or a three-way. No neutral wire was required. 20 on-off settings. It had a replaceable battery, incandescence up to 1800 watts. It was also compatible with LEDs, CFLs, and fluorescents. And another timer, it said it works with inductive ballasts up to 8 amps and electric ballasts 5000 VA.
What's that?
So VA. So when you see VA, it's volts, amperes, and it's roughly the power in watts. So it's a whole mathematical formula.
Are we going to do math today?
So the volts, amperes, basically how much power is needed to run a device. So it's basically watts. So you really need to look at the packaging when you're shopping, and you need to match the timer to the type of lights or motor you'll be working with. So if you're replacing a standard switch and you're putting in a timer that requires a neutral wire, in most cases a neutral wire is going to be available in the box, but not always. If you have a standard single pole switch, it's going to have 2 hot wires and a ground in most cases. So you won't have a ground in older homes or in most conduit in Chicago, Seattle, or parts of New York. If the timer needs a neutral wire and you have white wires connected in the box with a wire connector, what you're going to do is create a 6-inch pigtail wire that matches the gauge of the wire you're using on that circuit. You're going to put that in with the 2 neutral wires and connect it underneath the wire connector, and now you'll be able to connect that neutral wire to the timer.
How do you know what gauge?
So you're going to check your breaker, and we always want to turn the power off to any circuit we're working. So whenever we're doing any of these kind of projects, you want to turn off the power to the circuit, double check it with a tester. A shock under the right conditions can be deadly.
So not really right conditions.
So you want to look at your breaker or your fuse. If it's a 15 amp circuit, you're going to be using 14 gauge wire. A 20 amp circuit, you're going to be using 12 gauge wire. If you remove the old switch and look in your electrical box and you don't have neutral wires, you can't connect a timer that needs a neutral wire. So you're going to need to get one that doesn't require it. And you can never use a ground wire as a neutral. It has the potential to cause a fire or be a shock hazard. If you're connecting a ground wire to the neutral line, it's going to energize everything connected to the ground wires. So you can make the outside of appliances like a washing machine live and potentially deadly under the right conditions. Or if you're removing a device in that circuit in the future, it could be a shock hazard. So never use a ground as a neutral wire. When you're connecting some single pole timers or motion detectors, they want the feed wire coming from the service panel, or it's called the line wire, to be connected to a specific screw or wire lead, and the load wire, the wire going to the light, on a specific screw or wire. To figure out which wire coming into an electrical box is the line or load, what you're going to do is turn off the power to that circuit. You're going to double check it with an electrical tester to make sure it's off. You're going to remove the old switch and then separate the wires so nothing's touching. You're going to turn back on the power and then test the wires to find the one that's hot. And this is going to be your feed or your line wire. The other black or colored wire is your load. In most cases, your hot wires are going to be black or red. If you have conduit, it could be a few additional colors like yellow or blue. White or gray is going to be neutral. Bare or green is going to be ground. So if you have a three-way circuit, you have two switches that work together to operate your light. You want to make sure that your timer is a three-way. Some of the timers can be used as a single pole or a three-way. So you're going to have 3 screw terminals plus a ground screw, and one of the screws is going to have a piece of tape over it. So if you're using it as a single pole switch, you're going to use the 2 screws without the tape. And then if you use it as a three-way, you're going to have one dark colored screw, which is your common.
Right.
You're going to take the tape off, and then you're going to have 2 light colored screws, and those are your travelers. You're also going to have to pay attention to the wiring schematic. It's not wired like a traditional three-way switch. So one of the switches will be a standard three-way. The other one's going to be your sensor or timer. And depending on which box you have your sensor or your timer in, you're going to have an additional pigtail, and they're going to jump one of the travelers in most cases. But you really need to look at the wiring diagram. They are not wired like a traditional pair of three-way switches.
How different is it?
Well, it's interesting. It depends. Let's say you have a motion sensor. If you have it wired, so you have 2 boxes for a pair of three-way switches. And in the first box that you have the hot wire coming from the service panel, if it's wired there, let's say we have a motion sensor, your hot wire is going right to the common, the dark colored screw, and then you have your 2 travelers going to the second box, or the box, it's called the load box.
Right.
In that second box, a normal three-way switch would have the 2 travelers on the 2 light-colored screws, and then the wire going up to the light would be on your dark-colored common. But with this type of wiring in that second box, with a traditional three-way switch, now you're going to take one of those travelers, you're going to go to a wire connector, you're going to create 2 pigtails, and you're going to go from that wire connector to one of the travelers and the common, and under that wire connector you're going to connect the wire going up to the light. So it is much different wiring, and then it's wired differently if you have the traditional three-way switch in that first box, and then you have your motion sensor in the second box. It's wired different. So you really need to look at the diagram.
And read the instructions thoroughly.
Yeah, this is one place you have to read the instructions. Plug-in timers don't require any wiring. You're just going to plug it right into a wall outlet. You can get indoor and outdoor models, mechanical, digital, and heavy duty if you have appliances that are going to be connected to this. The plug-in timers are good for turning on and off lamps for security or for holiday lighting. And if you have a window air conditioner, space heater, or appliances, you want to make sure that you're getting heavy duty and you're matching it, whether it's 15 or 20 amp. Outdoor plug-in timers are weather resistant, and you can get mechanical, digital, or photocell. The photocell timers give you the option for on at dusk, off at dawn, or they can shut off 2, 4, 6, or 8 hours after they turn on at dusk. That's going to save you energy. Outdoor timers work well for holiday or landscape lighting. You can put this on a pool pump, fountains, or if you're in a really cold climate, you can put it on an engine heater. When you're comparing models, I would look at the length of the power cord and the amount of outlets. I like the battery backups that are going to keep the program on a digital timer. That way if the electricity goes out when you're on vacation, it's not going to lose the time. Also, stake timers are really easy to install rather than having to put in an anchor on an outside wall. If you're replacing a light switch with a dimmer switch, you need to make sure it's compatible with the type of bulbs you're going to be using. Incandescents and halogens can work with almost any dimmer, but if you have CFLs or LEDs, the bulbs need to be dimmable, and the dimmer switch needs to be rated for LEDs and CFLs. Also, if you have fluorescence, either magnetic or electronic ballast or low voltage lighting, you need to match it to the type of dimmer switch you're picking. And one of the biggest problems now with these dimmers is flickering LEDs or CFLs. So when you're buying a dimmer for LEDs, you need to check the amount of watts. A dimmer may be rated for 600 watts for incandescent, but only 300 watts for LEDs. So
that
even
seems backwards.
Yeah, it's weird. So even though the LEDs use a lot less energy, you still have to add up all of the watts for all of the bulbs on the circuit the dimmer's going to be controlling and match the dimmer switch to the load. And all of the bulbs have to be dimmable. So with the LEDs and CFLs, they're going to have a minimum and a maximum load level. And the LED dimmer switches are going to have some way to set the minimum load level for the LED bulbs. So there's either going to be a small dial, a lever, or a button that's going to set that minimum load level for you. To set the minimum load level for LED bulbs, you're going to need to get to that adjustment dial or button. If you have a lever or a dial, what you're going to do is first turn down the dimmer to the lowest setting. You're going to take off the cover plate, and that's going to allow you to see the lever or the dial. You're going to turn it down to the lowest setting. The bulbs are either going to go off or they're going to start flickering. You're going to slowly turn that adjustment dial or lever up until all the bulbs are on and they're not flickering anymore. And now you've set the minimum load level. You put your cover plate back on, and now you can turn it on and off, and you can set it high and low, and it's not going to flicker anymore. If you have an adjustment button, you're going to do the same thing. Take off the cover plate, your dimmer switch is all the way down. There's different types, so you're going to have to read the instructions, but many of them have, like 7 different settings. So you'll press that button once, twice, 3 times until all the bulbs stop flickering, and now you've set it. So to lock it in, some of them require you to turn it on and off. Some of you require to turn the dimmer all the way up and all the way down. So you're going to have to read the instructions.
So would you have to do this if you change the bulbs?
Yeah, it's strange. So different manufacturers, the bulbs have different minimum and maximum load levels. So they're fine until you change bulbs, and then you may have to go through this process again. When you're comparing dimmers, you're also going to have to read the packaging. Some require a neutral wire and some don't. Some top-rated in-wall timers and dimmers. Intermatic, Leviton, it's Leviton. Honeywell, Lutron, it's Lutron. Westek, Westek. Eaton, Eaton. Pass and Seymour, it's Pass. And Seymour, Seymour. For plug-in timers, Intermatic, Leviton, Woods, Sentry, GE, Defiant, and Westek.
Do you have anything else to add?
When you're shopping for timers or dimmers, look at the packaging to match it to single pole or 3-way. Do you need a neutral wire? Add up all of the watts on the bulbs it's going to be controlling, and then match it to the type of bulbs. If you're going to be using fluorescent bulbs, for example, what type of ballast? With dimmers, make sure you're getting dimmable bulbs and match the type of bulbs or system.
Let's wrap this up.
You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, the Spotify mobile app, the Google Play Music app, iHeartRadio, and CastBox.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a review.
You can check out our home improvement videos on our YouTube channel, Fix It Home Improvement.
And you can subscribe to that as well.
You can download our books, Home Improvement Solutions, What Every Homeowner Should Know, on Amazon, and there's 4 of them.
If you enjoyed it, please leave us a 5-star rating and review.
You can email us at fixitpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow Cindy at FixItCohost.
On Twitter.
What did I say?
Nothing.
Oh, okay. Twitter. Cindy has tons of pictures. It's pretty interesting.
Thank you for listening.
Talk to you next week.